The stars looked cold and distant as the HFY war fleet moved through space. 300 massive ships, each one bigger than a city, traveled together toward a small blue planet. Commander Zelthos stood on the main bridge of his flagship. He felt proud and powerful. His species had conquered 47 different worlds. Earth would be number 48. His second officer walked up to him with a worried look on his face. The officer held a data tablet in his four-fingered hand. Zelthos could see the concern in his eyes. "Commander, the humans have sent us another message. This is their third warning. They are telling us to turn back and leave their space." Zelthos laughed. It was a deep rumbling sound that made the other crew members look up from their stations. He waved his hand as if brushing away a small insect. "Ignore them. They are nothing but primitives. They have barely made it to their own moon. What can they possibly do to us? Our weapons can destroy entire continents. Our shields can stop anything they throw at us." The second officer nodded slowly, but he did not look convinced. He walked back to his station and deleted the human message without reading it. This was a mistake, but nobody on the HFY bridge knew it yet. Far below on Earth, deep inside a mountain in Colorado, Colonel Jake Morrison sat in front of a wall of screens. He had not slept well in 3 days. His eyes felt tired and his coffee had gone cold hours ago. He watched the alien ships getting closer and closer to Earth. Each dot on his screen represented a ship that could kill millions of people. "Colonel Morrison, they are not responding to our warnings." The voice came from Lieutenant Amy Brooks. She was young, only 26 years old, but she was one of the best officers Jake had ever worked with. She sat at her station with her hands ready on the controls. Jake rubbed his face with both hands. He knew this moment would come eventually. Humanity had prepared for it. They had spent decades getting ready, but he had hoped the aliens would be smart enough to turn back. He had hoped they would listen. "How long until they cross the boundary line?" he asked. Amy checked her instruments. Numbers and graphs flashed across her screens. 4 hours and 17 minutes until they reached the Luna perimeter. The Luna perimeter was an invisible line in space. It sat halfway between Earth and the Moon. To anyone looking at it, there was nothing there. No ships, no weapons, no barriers. Just empty space. But it was the most important defensive line humanity had ever created. Jake took a deep breath. This was the moment everything would change. "Send out the activation order. Contact all stations. Tell them to prepare Protocol Nightfall." Amy's fingers moved quickly across her keyboard. "Sir, are you absolutely sure? Once we turn it on, we cannot turn it back off easily. The whole world will know what we have been hiding." "They had 3 chances," Jake said quietly. His voice was calm but firm. "We warned them 3 times. We used their own language. We were clear and direct. They chose to ignore us. That is their choice, and now they face the consequences." All around the planet, hidden bases began to wake up. In the deserts of Nevada, under the ice of Antarctica, beneath the ocean floor near Japan, and inside mountains across North America and Europe, secret facilities hummed to life. These places had been built over 30 years. They used technology that most people did not know existed, technology that had been developed in secret, tested in secret, and kept hidden from the rest of the galaxy. The HFY had made a terrible mistake. They had looked at Earth's public technology and assumed that was everything humans could do. They saw the space stations, the small ships, the basic satellites. They thought humans were weak and easy to defeat. They had no idea what was hidden beneath the surface. Humanity had learned an important lesson from history. Sometimes the best weapon was the one your enemy did not know you had. And Earth had built the greatest defensive weapon in the galaxy. They called it the domain field. Jake watched as status reports came in from every station. Green lights appeared on his main screen one by one. Nevada online. Antarctica online. Japan online. Everything was working perfectly. "All stations report ready," Amy said. "The domain field can be activated on your command." Jake looked at the screen showing the alien fleet. They were still coming. Still confident. Still certain of their victory. He felt no anger toward them, only sadness that they had chosen this path. "Activate the field," he ordered. Amy pressed a series of buttons. Deep underground, massive machines began to work. They did not make much noise. There were no explosions or bright lights. But across space, something invisible and powerful began to spread outward from Earth. The domain field was based on quantum physics, the science of the very small. Human scientists had discovered how to create a bubble of controlled space around Earth. Inside this bubble, they could control energy itself. They could take power from anything and store it. Ships, weapons, even light itself could be controlled within the domain field. It had taken the combined effort of every nation on Earth to build it. Countries that had been enemies had worked together. Scientists had shared their knowledge freely. Resources had been pooled, because everyone understood one simple truth. If aliens attacked Earth, it would not matter what country you were from. Everyone would suffer or everyone would survive together. The field spread outward from Earth like an invisible sphere. It moved silently through space at incredible speed. Within minutes, it reached the lunar perimeter and stopped. It formed a perfect bubble around Earth and the Moon. And then it waited. On the Vakreen flagship, nobody noticed anything at first. The ships continued forward. Zeltos smiled at his crew. You see? Nothing but empty threats from a scared species. But in the engineering section of his ship, alarms began to sound. The chief engineer stared at his displays in confusion. Something was very wrong. The ship's power systems were acting strangely. Energy readings were dropping for no reason. Jake Morrison leaned back in his chair. He looked tired but relieved. Now we wait. When they cross the line, they will understand. They will learn what it means to ignore Earth's warnings. Amy looked at him. Do you think they will surrender? They will have no choice, Jake replied. In a few hours, the most powerful war fleet in their part of the galaxy will be completely helpless. And then the real negotiations will begin. The Vakreen fleet moved forward, unaware that they were about to cross a line that would change everything. Unaware that they were flying into a trap they could not escape. Unaware that they had just made the worst mistake in their species' history, the countdown continued. 4 hours until they reached the boundary. 4 hours until 300 warships would become 300 floating pieces of metal. 4 hours until Commander Zeltos would understand what real power looked like. The Vakreen fleet crossed the invisible line in space. Commander Zeltos watched the blue planet growing larger on his main viewing screen. He felt satisfied. In a few more hours, they would be in position to begin their attack. The humans would surrender quickly once they saw the power of Vakreen weapons. Commander, we have successfully crossed their boundary line, his navigation officer reported. No resistance detected. No weapons fired. Their warnings were meaningless, Zeltos nodded. Prepare the invasion force. We will show these primitives what happens when they refuse to submit to the Vakreen Empire. But on the far side of Earth's moon, Lieutenant Lisa Hayes saw something very different on her instruments. She sat on the bridge of the USS Valiant, one of Earth's newest defensive ships. The Valiant was positioned just outside the domain field's boundary. From here, they could watch everything that happened inside the field without being affected themselves. Captain Sullivan, the enemy fleet has entered the domain, Lisa reported. Her voice was calm, but she felt excited. Years of preparation were about to be tested. Captain Greg Sullivan was a veteran officer. He had served in the Navy before joining the Space Defense Force. His hair was gray and his face showed the lines of a man who had seen many difficult situations. But his eyes were sharp and focused. Good. Now we wait and watch. The field will do its job. All ships maintain position outside the perimeter. Do not enter the domain under any circumstances. Inside the domain field, the Vakreen ships continued forward for several more minutes. Everything seemed normal. The crew went about their duties. Some were preparing weapons. Others were checking navigation systems. A few were eating their meals in the ship's cafeteria. Then the alarm started. On the bridge of the flagship, red warning lights began flashing. The chief science officer jumped up from his station. His face showed confusion and fear. He was an old Vakreen who had served in 40 different battles. He had never looked scared before. Commander, we have a critical problem. Our main power systems are failing. The antimatter reactor is losing containment stability. Zelthos stood up from his command chair. That is impossible. Our reactors are the most advanced in the galaxy. Run a diagnostic. I already did, sir. The reactor is fine. It is still generating power normally, but the power is disappearing. It is as if something is draining the energy away faster than we can produce it. Across the bridge, more alarms sounded. The weapons officer spoke up, his voice cracking with panic. Sir, weapon systems are offline. All of them. Plasma cannons, missile batteries, energy shields. Everything is going dark. Switch to backup power, Zelthos ordered. He tried to keep his voice steady, but he could feel fear growing in his chest. Backup power is also being drained, sir. Emergency batteries are dropping to critical levels. Life support is switching to minimal mode. Zelthos looked around his bridge. The bright lights were dimming. Computer screens were flickering. He could hear the hum of the ship's systems growing quieter and quieter. Get me a status report from the rest of the fleet. The communications officer pressed buttons on his panel, but nothing happened. Sir, communications are down. I cannot reach the other ships. On every one of the 300 Vakreen warships, the same thing was happening. Power systems were failing. Engines were shutting down. Weapons could not fire. The mighty fleet that had destroyed worlds was becoming helpless in a matter of minutes. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, Dr. Peter Chen watched his instruments with satisfaction. The domain field was working exactly as his team had designed it. Every calculation was correct. Every prediction was coming true. Peter was a physicist who had spent his entire adult life working on this project. He had given up a normal career, a normal life, everything to help build Earth's defense. Now at age 52, he was watching his life's work succeed. Colonel Morrison, the field is performing perfectly. Peter spoke into his headset. The alien ships are now running on minimal power only. Their energy production is being redirected into our quantum storage batteries. Within 6 hours, their ships will be completely dark and cold. Jake Morrison's voice came back through the speaker. How much energy are we collecting? More than we expected? These ships produce enormous amounts of power. We are storing enough energy to run every city on Earth for 3 months. If they had actually fired their weapons, we would have collected even more. Jake allowed himself a small smile. Then they are trapped. Completely trapped, sir. They cannot move, cannot fight, cannot communicate. They are just floating metal boxes now. On the Vakreen flagship, emergency lighting cast strange shadows across the bridge. Commander Zeltos sat in his command chair, trying to understand what had happened. His science officer stood beside him, holding a small battery-powered tablet. It was the only device still working reliably. Commander, I have been studying what little data I can access, the science officer said. I believe I understand what has happened to us. Explain, Zeltos demanded. The humans have created some kind of energy field around their planet. It does not block our systems or damage them. Instead, it redirects all energy we produce. Every time our reactors generate power, that power is immediately pulled away from our systems and sent somewhere else. Probably to storage facilities on Earth. Zeltos felt sick. How is this possible? They are supposed to be primitive. They have only had spaceflight for a few decades. That is what they wanted us to believe, sir. But I think they have been far more advanced than we realized. They simply kept their best technology hidden. They showed the galaxy only what they wanted us to see. Can we escape this field? The science officer shook his head sadly. No, sir. Without power, we cannot move our ships. We are trapped here until we either surrender or die when life support fails completely. Zelthos closed his eyes. He had led his fleet to complete disaster. How long do we have? Life support is running on the last of our emergency reserves. 6 hours, maybe 7 if we are lucky. Jake Morrison received the calculations from Dr. Chen and made his decision. Open a communication channel to the alien fleet. Use our broadcast system since their communications are down. Amy Brooks activated the system. A powerful transmitter on Earth's surface sent a message directly to the Vakreen ships. The message was translated into their language, clear and simple. Vakreen Fleet, this is Earth Defense Command. You have entered our domain. We warned you 3 times to turn back. You chose to ignore those warnings. Now your ships have no power. Your weapons cannot function. Your engines cannot move you. You have 6 hours before your life support systems fail completely. You have 2 choices. You can surrender, and we will provide assistance to keep your crews alive. Or you can refuse and face the consequences. You have 1 hour to decide. This is your only chance. On the Vakreen flagship, Zelthos listened to the message play over and over. His translator made sure he understood every word. He looked around his dark, cold bridge. His crew looked back at him, waiting for orders. He thought about his wife back on his home world. His children. The billions of Vakreen citizens who trusted him to protect their empire. He had failed them all by not listening to the warnings. Prepare a surrender message, he said quietly. We have no choice. The humans have defeated us without firing a single shot. His second officer looked shocked. Commander, we cannot surrender. What will the High Council say? Zeltos stood up slowly. The High Council is not here. They are not watching their crew members struggle to breathe as the air gets thinner. They are not sitting in the cold and dark. I am, and I will not let my people die because of my pride. Prepare the surrender message now. Captain Greg Sullivan watched from the Valiant as a small signal appeared on his sensors. It was weak, barely functioning, but it was there. A surrender signal from the Vakreen flagship. Well, that was faster than expected, Greg said. They still have 5 hours of life support left. Contact Colonel Morrison. Tell him the aliens have surrendered. Begin rescue operations. Lieutenant Amy Brooks piloted her shuttle through the darkness of space. Behind her, 11 more shuttles followed in a tight formation. Each one carried a team of trained soldiers and technicians. Their mission was simple but dangerous. They were going to board the alien flagship and take control of it. Amy had trained for this moment for 3 years. She had studied alien psychology, learned basic Vakreen language, and practiced zero-gravity combat hundreds of times. But knowing something in training was different from doing it in reality. Her hands felt sweaty inside her gloves. Her heart beat fast in her chest. Blue Team, this is Blue Leader, she spoke into her radio. We are approaching the target. Stay alert. These aliens are defeated, but they might still be desperate. Remember your training and watch each other's backs. The responses came back one by one from the other shuttle pilots. Everyone was ready. Everyone was nervous. Everyone knew how important this mission was. The Vakreen flagship looked enormous as they got closer. It was 3 kilometers long and half a kilometer wide. Even without power, it looked dangerous and impressive. But Amy could see that it was truly helpless. No lights showed in the windows. No weapons moved to track their approach. It was just a giant dead piece of metal floating in space. Colonel Morrison, we are beginning docking procedures, Amy reported to Earth. Jake Morrison's voice came back through her radio. Copy that, Blue Leader. Take your time and do it safely. The aliens have surrendered, but stay cautious. We cannot afford to lose anyone. Amy guided her shuttle to an airlock on the side of the huge ship. The other shuttles moved to different airlocks across the vessel. Within 10 minutes, all 12 teams were ready to enter. Inside the flagship, Commander Zeltos waited in the docking bay. He had ordered his crew to offer no resistance. They stood in neat lines, unarmed and waiting. Emergency lighting cast a dim glow across the massive space. The air was cold and getting colder. Zeltos could see his breath forming small clouds. The airlock door opened with a hiss of pressure equalizing. Human soldiers came through, moving quickly and professionally. They wore advanced armor and carried weapons that Zeltos had never seen before. They spread out and secured the area in seconds. These were not the primitive warriors he had expected. Amy Brooks stepped forward. She was much smaller than any Vakreen, but she walked with confidence. Her helmet visor was up so they could see her face. She looked young, which surprised Zeltos. How could someone so young be leading such an important mission? Commander Zeltos, Amy said in surprisingly good Vakreen language. On behalf of Earth's Unified Defense Command, I am taking command of this vessel. Your crew will be processed and eventually returned to your homeworld. But first we need to make sure everyone stays safe and calm. Zeltos stepped forward slowly. He was much taller than the human woman, but he felt small, defeated, ashamed. We will cooperate fully. My crew is cold and hungry, but they will follow orders. We surrender without conditions, Amy nodded. Thank you, Commander. My team will restore minimal life support to keep everyone comfortable. Food and water will be provided. Medical assistance is available if anyone needs it. She turned to her team. Martinez, Chen, get the portable generators running. Connect them to life support only. Nothing else gets power. Stevens, coordinate with the other teams. Make sure all 300 ships are secure. The human soldiers moved quickly. They knew exactly what to do. Within an hour, the Vakreen crew had warm air to breathe and lights to see by. Food packages were distributed. It was basic food, not fancy, but it was warm and filling. Some of the Vakreen crew began to relax a little. Zeltos sat in what had been his ready room, now occupied by Amy Brooks and her senior staff. They had set up portable computers and communication equipment. The humans worked efficiently and seemed completely comfortable in this situation. I must ask, Zeltos said quietly, how did you develop such technology? Our intelligence reports said you were decades away from having any real defensive capabilities. You have only been to your moon a handful of times. Yet you have created something that defeated our entire fleet without firing a single shot. Amy looked at him for a long moment before answering. She seemed to be deciding how much to tell him. Commander, what did you see when you looked at Earth? I saw a primitive world. Small space stations, basic satellites, ships that could barely leave your atmosphere. Exactly, Amy said. That is what we wanted you to see. That is what we showed to every species that looked at us. Do you know how long it took humans to go from our first powered flight to landing on the moon? Zeltos thought back to the intelligence briefings. Approximately 66 of your years. 66 years, Amy repeated. Did you really think we just stopped advancing after that? Did you think we would reach space and then become satisfied with small achievements? She pulled up an image on her portable computer. It showed a timeline of human technological development. We did not stop, Commander. We accelerated. But we learned something important from our own history. We learned that sometimes the best way to stay safe is to appear weak, to let potential enemies underestimate you. So you hid your real capabilities. We did more than hide them. We deliberately showed the galaxy a false picture of what we could do. Every nation on Earth agreed to this plan. We built the domain field in secret over 30 years. We tested it in ways that could not be detected. We prepared for the day when someone would ignore our warnings and attack us. Zelthos felt a deep sadness. And we were the test case. You chose to be, Amy said, not unkindly. We sent you 3 warnings. 3 clear messages in your own language. We told you what would happen if you entered our space. Other species received the same warnings. The Dravix Collective turned back. The Corellian Empire turned back. They understood that any species confident enough to give 3 warnings might have good reason for that confidence. She stood up and walked to the window. Earth was visible in the distance, blue and beautiful and peaceful. We do not want to conquer anyone, Commander. We do not want an empire. We just want to be left alone to develop in peace. The domain field ensures that any species that attacks us finds their own power used against them. The more they try to fight, the stronger we become. What will happen to my crew? Zeltos asked. To my ships? Your ships will be towed outside the domain boundary. Once they are beyond the field, their systems will begin to work again. We are not keeping the energy we captured from you. It will all be returned. You will be able to fly home under your own power. Zelthos looked surprised. You are giving back our ships? Why? Amy turned to face him. Because we are not conquerors. We proved our point. You attacked us and failed completely. That is the message we want you to take back to your government and to the galaxy. Earth cannot be conquered. Our domain is absolute, but we do not seek revenge or destruction. We simply want recognition of our boundaries and our sovereignty. In another part of the ship, human engineers were examining the Vacrine technology. Dr. Peter Chen had come up from Earth specifically to study the alien power systems. He stood in the massive engineering section looking at the reactor core with fascination. This is remarkable, he said to his assistant, Dr. Nina Martinez. Their antimatter reactor is incredibly efficient. Much better than our current designs, Nina nodded. Should we copy it? No, Peter said firmly. We are not here to steal their technology. We are here to understand how our domain field affected it, and to make sure returning power to them is safe. The whole point of Earth's strategy is to prove we are not aggressive. If we start stealing technology from defeated enemies, we become what we claim not to be. Back on Earth, Jake Morrison briefed the United Nations Security Council. Representatives from every nation watched as he explained the situation. All 300 enemy ships are now under our control, Jake reported. No casualties on either side. The Vacrine crew are being treated well. We estimate it will take another week to tow all their ships beyond the domain boundary and restore their power systems. The Secretary General, an older man named Carlos Mendoza, leaned forward. Colonel Morrison, the entire galaxy is watching this situation. We have received communication requests from 24 different species. How should we respond? Jake smiled slightly. Tell them the truth. Earth has defensive capabilities that make attacking us pointless. We gave fair warning. The warning was ignored. The consequences were non-lethal but absolute, and we are returning the defeated fleet intact to show that we are not a threat to peaceful species. What about the Vacrine government? Asked the ambassador from China. What if they want revenge? They would be welcome to try, Jake said. But I do not think they will. Commander Zeltos will return home with a story that will spread across the galaxy. A story about the most powerful fleet in their region being defeated without taking any damage to Earth, being captured without firing a shot, and being released unharmed to tell others what happened. That is the message we want the galaxy to receive. The work of moving 300 massive alien warships was slow and difficult, Human ships, much smaller than the Vakrine vessels, attached powerful towing cables to each enemy ship. Then one by one they began the long process of pulling them beyond the Luna perimeter. Captain Greg Sullivan stood on the bridge of the USS Valiant, coordinating the operation. His ship was one of 50 human vessels working on the towing mission. It was tedious work, but it was important. Every alien ship needed to be moved carefully and precisely. "Status report," Greg ordered. Lieutenant Katie Foster looked up from her station. "Sir, we have successfully moved 48 ships beyond the boundary. 152 more to go. At current pace, we will complete the operation in 6 days." Greg nodded. 6 days was actually ahead of schedule. His crew was working well together. "Any problems?" "Minor ones only, sir. Some of the alien ships are so large that we need 3 of our tugs to move them, but nothing we cannot handle." On the Vakrine flagship, now being towed by 2 human vessels, Commander Zeltos watched through a window as his ship slowly moved through space. He felt strange emotions, relief that his crew would survive, shame at his defeat, and something else: respect. Amy Brooks found him standing there looking out at the stars. She had been staying on the alien ship to coordinate with her teams. Over the past week, she had spoken with Zeltos many times. She found him to be intelligent and reasonable, despite his earlier mistake of attacking Earth. "Your government has been informed of the situation," Amy told him. "They are sending representatives to meet you at the boundary." "I suppose they are not happy with me," Zeltos said quietly. "Probably not. But you made the right choice once you understood the situation. You surrendered quickly and saved your crew. That takes courage." Zeltos looked down at her. "You are generous to a defeated enemy. That is not common in the galaxy." "Maybe that is why Earth is different," Amy replied. "We remember our own history. We fought terrible wars among ourselves. Millions died because of pride and stubbornness. We learned that treating defeated enemies with respect often leads to peace, while treating them with cruelty only leads to more war." She walked to the window and stood beside him. "Your ships will be returned to you fully functional. The energy we captured has been stored. When you cross back outside the domain, all that energy will be released back into your systems. Your ships will power up as if nothing happened. And what do you want from us in return? Only that you tell the truth about what happened here. Tell your government. Tell the Galactic Council. Tell any species that asks." Earth gave 3 warnings. Those warnings were ignored. Earth defended itself without killing anyone, and Earth returned the defeated fleet intact. "That is the story we want told." Zeltos nodded slowly. "I will tell that story. I have no choice. My crew will tell it also. Within a year, every species in this part of the galaxy will know what happened to the Vakrine fleet that ignored Earth's warnings." Far above them, the towing operation continued. Human ships worked around the clock in shifts. Engineers carefully monitored each alien vessel to ensure nothing went wrong. Medical teams checked on the Vakrine crews regularly, making sure everyone remained healthy. Dr. Peter Chen spent most of his time studying how the domain field had affected the different types of alien ships. Each one was slightly different. Some used antimatter reactors, others used fusion cores. A few had power systems Peter had never seen before, but the domain field had neutralized all of them equally. "It is beautiful in a way," Peter said to his assistant Nina as they reviewed the data. "The field does not care what type of energy you produce. It simply redirects all of it. The more powerful your weapons, the more energy we capture. An aggressive enemy makes us stronger, not weaker." Nina looked at the numbers on her screen. "We captured enough energy from this fleet to power every city on Earth for almost a year. Imagine what would happen if a truly massive fleet attacked us. They would make us the most energy-rich planet in the galaxy," Peter said with a slight smile. "And they would drift helplessly while we collected their power. The domain field is not just a defensive weapon. It is an economic advantage." Back on Earth, the story was spreading. News organizations across the planet reported on the alien fleet's defeat. For the first time, the public learned about the domain field. People reacted with a mixture of pride, relief, and surprise. Many had not known Earth possessed such advanced technology. Jake Morrison gave interviews to explain the situation. He appeared on television and answered questions from journalists around the world. He was calm and clear in his explanations. "The domain field has been in development for 3 decades, Jake explained to a reporter from New York. "Every nation contributed to its creation. It represents humanity's commitment to defending our home without becoming aggressive conquerors ourselves. Colonel Morrison, some people are worried about the cost of maintaining such a system. The reporter asked. Can you address those concerns? The domain field is actually self-sustaining now, Jake replied. The energy we captured from the Vakreen fleet is more than enough to power the field for several years. And if another hostile fleet attacks us, they will only add to our energy reserves. The system pays for itself. In Geneva, the United Nations held a special session to discuss Earth's new relationship with the galaxy. Secretary General Carlos Mendoza addressed the assembly. My fellow humans, we stand at a turning point in our history. We are no longer isolated on our small planet. The galaxy knows we exist, and now they know we can defend ourselves. We must decide how to move forward. Do we close ourselves off and refuse contact with other species? Or do we engage with the galaxy from a position of strength and safety? The debate lasted for hours. Representatives argued passionately on both sides. But eventually a consensus emerged. Earth would remain open to peaceful contact and trade, but the domain field would remain active, a permanent shield protecting humanity's home. On the 6th day of the towing operation, the last Vakreen ship crossed beyond the Luna perimeter. Captain Greg Sullivan watched from the Valiant as the final vessel moved into position with its fellow ships. All ships are now outside the domain, Lieutenant Katie Foster reported, beginning power restoration sequence. Down on Earth, Dr. Peter Chen monitored the process carefully. The captured energy was being released back to the alien ships in a controlled manner. Too much at once could damage their systems. Too little, and they would not have enough power to return home. Energy transfer at 20%, Peter reported. All systems nominal, increasing to 40%. On the Vakreen flagship, lights began to flicker on. Computer systems rebooted. The hum of the reactor grew louder. Commander Zeltos felt warmth returning to the air as life support systems came back to full power. We are getting power back, his chief engineer reported excitedly. All primary systems are coming online. Engines are functional. Weapons are functional. Everything is working normally. Zelthos sat in his command chair and looked at his bridge. His crew looked healthier and happier now that they were warm and had full power again. But they also looked different. They looked like people who had learned an important lesson. Prepare for departure, Zelthos ordered. Set course for home. Standard speed. No weapons charged. Amy Brooks and her team had transferred back to their shuttles before the power was restored. She watched from a safe distance as the 300 Vakreen ships slowly began to move away from Earth. Their engines glowed. Their navigation lights blinked. They looked powerful and dangerous again, but Amy knew the truth. They had been completely helpless just hours ago, and they could be made helpless again if they ever returned with hostile intent. That knowledge would spread throughout the galaxy. It was the best deterrent humanity could ask for. Blue Team, this is Blue Leader, Amy said into her radio. Mission complete. All ships are leaving peacefully. Return to base. Jake Morrison watched from Earth as the alien fleet departed. They moved slowly at first, almost reluctantly. But gradually they picked up speed. Within hours they were gone from Earth's sensor range, heading back toward their home territory. Well, that is done, Jake said to himself. Now we see what happens next. 2 months passed after the Vakreen fleet left Earth's space. Life slowly returned to normal for most people on the planet. But for those who worked in Earth's defense, everything had changed. The secret was out. The galaxy knew about the domain field. Now humanity had to deal with the consequences of that knowledge. Commander Zeltos stood before the Vakreen High Council in the Grand Chamber on his home world. The room was huge and decorated with symbols of military victories from centuries past. 7 council members sat on raised platforms looking down at him with cold expressions. He felt very small standing there alone. Let me understand this correctly, the High Counselor said. Her voice was sharp and angry. You commanded the finest fleet our empire has ever assembled. 300 warships, the most powerful weapons in our arsenal, and you lost them all without firing a single shot. Zelthos kept his head up. He would not show weakness even though he felt ashamed. Yes, Counselor. That is correct. How is such a thing possible? Another council member demanded. Explain to us how an entire fleet becomes helpless. Zelthos had prepared for this moment. He had thought carefully about what to say. The humans possess technology far beyond what we believed. They have created an energy field around their planet. Within this field, they can control and redirect any power source. Our weapons could not fire. Our engines could not function. Even our life support systems barely worked. We were completely trapped. And you surrendered, the High Counselor said. It was not a question. It was an accusation. I had a choice, Zelthos replied. Watch my crews die slowly as their air ran out or surrender and save their lives. I chose to save them. I would make the same choice again. The council chamber was silent for a long moment. Finally, one of the older members spoke. What happened after you surrendered? The humans boarded our ships. They provided food, warmth, and medical care. They treated us with respect, not as conquered enemies but as defeated adversaries. Then they towed all our ships outside their defensive boundary and returned full power to us. They let us leave freely. Another council member leaned forward. They returned your ships? With weapons intact? Yes, Counselor. Everything was returned in perfect working order. They kept nothing except the energy they had captured during our time inside their field, and they explained that this energy would power their defensive system for years. The High Counselor looked troubled. So they have created a perfect defense, one that cannot be defeated by force. Worse than that, Zelthos said. The more force you use against them, the stronger they become. Any energy directed at Earth simply makes them more powerful. Attack them with a small fleet and they capture that energy. Attack them with a massive fleet and they capture even more. There is no military solution to the problem they present. The council members talked among themselves quietly. Zelthos waited. He knew his career was probably over. He might face punishment or exile, but at least his crews were alive and safe. Finally, the High Counselor spoke again. Commander Zelthos, you are hereby removed from command. However, you will not face criminal charges. You acted to save lives when facing an impossible situation. You are dismissed. Zelthos bowed and left the chamber. As he walked through the halls of the government building, he felt relieved. His career was over, but he was alive. His crews were alive, and perhaps his failure would save other species from making the same mistake. On Earth, Jake Morrison sat in a meeting room with representatives from several alien species. These were peaceful species, ones that had never threatened Earth. They wanted to establish diplomatic and trade relationships. The meeting was friendly and productive. An ambassador from the Dravix collective, a species that resembled tall, thin birds, spoke first. Colonel Morrison, we are grateful that Earth has agreed to meet with us. We watched what happened with the Vakreen fleet. It was very impressive. Thank you, Jake replied. But I hope you understand that our goal is not to impress anyone. We simply want to defend our home. We understand completely, said another ambassador. This one from the Corellian Empire. The Corellians looked like large cats that walked upright. That is why we turned back when we received your warnings years ago. We recognized that any species confident enough to issue such warnings likely had good reason. Jake smiled. That was wise. I wish more species were as thoughtful. A third ambassador from a species called the Trell, who resembled intelligent octopuses, asked a question. Colonel, many species are curious about your domain field. Would Earth be willing to share this technology? It could revolutionize defense across the galaxy. Jake shook his head firmly. No, the domain field is Earth's sovereign defensive system. We will not share the technology, sell it, or allow anyone to study it. This is non-negotiable. The Trell ambassador nodded, his tentacles moving in a way that suggested understanding. We expected that answer. But we had to ask. What about trade? Would Earth be interested in commercial relationships? Yes, Jake said. We are very interested in peaceful trade. Earth has much to offer, and we would like to learn from other species. But all trade must happen outside the domain boundary. No foreign ships will be allowed inside our defensive perimeter. That seems reasonable, the Dravix ambassador said. We can establish a trading station near your moon, a neutral zone where ships from many species can meet safely. The meeting continued for several more hours. By the end, the foundations of Earth's first real diplomatic relationships with alien species had been established. It was a historic moment, and Jake felt the weight of it. Later that evening, Jake stood on the observation deck of a space station orbiting Earth. Captain Greg Sullivan joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might need this, Greg said, handing one to Jake. Thanks. Jake took a sip. The coffee was strong and hot, exactly what he needed. Hard to believe how much has changed in just 2 months. We went from being ignored by the galaxy to being respected, Greg said. The domain field did that. The domain field helped, Jake agreed. But I think it was more than that. We showed that we are willing to defend ourselves, but also that we are not cruel or aggressive. We captured an enemy fleet and returned it undamaged. That sent a powerful message. Greg looked down at Earth, blue and peaceful below them. Do you think there will be more challenges? More species that ignore the warnings? Probably, Jake said. There is always someone who thinks they are special, that the rules do not apply to them. But each time someone tests us, we prove again that the domain is real and absolute. Eventually, the message will spread far enough that attacks become rare. What about the future? Greg asked. What is next for humanity? Jake thought about that question. He had been thinking about it a lot lately. We expand carefully. We explore, we learn, but we always maintain the domain. Earth will always be protected. No matter how far we spread across the galaxy, this planet remains our home and our sanctuary. They stood in silence for a while, watching the planet turn slowly beneath them. Somewhere down there, billions of people were living their lives. Most of them would never know how close they had come to invasion. Most of them would never understand the delicate balance of power and diplomacy that now protected them, but Jake knew, and he would spend the rest of his life making sure that balance remained stable. In the weeks and months that followed, the story of Earth's domain spread across the galaxy. It was told in different ways by different species. Some called it a cautionary tale. Others called it a miracle of engineering. But everyone agreed on the basic facts. Earth had warned the Vakreen 3 times. The warnings were ignored. 300 warships entered Earth's space with hostile intent. All 300 were neutralized without violence. The crews were treated well and returned home safely. And now Earth stood as a protected world, surrounded by an invisible shield that could not be breached by force. The domain became legendary. Young Vakreen military officers studied what happened to Zeltos as an example of overconfidence, leading to disaster. Diplomatic academies across the galaxy taught about Earth as a case study in effective deterrence. And species planning exploration into human space made sure to respect the boundaries humanity had established. Lieutenant Amy Brooks received a promotion to captain for her role in the peaceful resolution of the crisis. She took command of a new ship, one designed specifically for first contact situations with alien species. Her orders were clear: be firm but fair, be strong but not aggressive. And always remember that Earth's strength came from both its technology and its values. Dr. Peter Chen continued his work on the domain field, making small improvements and refinements. The system became more efficient, more powerful, but Peter never forgot the ethical principles behind it. The domain was defensive only. It would never be used to attack or conquer. That was the promise humanity had made, and Peter intended to keep it. Years passed. Earth's relationships with other species grew stronger. Trade flourished. Cultural exchanges happened. Humans traveled to other worlds and aliens visited Earth, though always outside the domain boundary. A new generation grew up knowing that Earth was protected, that humanity had a place in the galaxy, and that their homeworld was safe behind an invisible shield of pure energy. Commander Zeltos, retired and living quietly,